I have an amazing, I'm also going to be the moderator today. I have an amazing group of panelists with us, and I'm going to introduce them, or I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment. I wanted to make sure to kind of go over a little bit of the housekeeping. Below we have a chat room, and we have a chat, and in there I'd really love you to know who's here. So be sure and sign in, and also share where you're from. And we also have a Q&A feature, so our questions and answers. So if you have any questions that you'd like to pose to the panelists, you can be able to write them in there. We'll be probably looking at those in the last 15 minutes because we want to make sure that we get through our topics and our questions for today. So at this time, I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves, tell them a little bit about where they're from and what they teach. And we'll start with Danielle.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Puenas. I'm an adapted PE specialist for Irvine Unified School District, and that's in Orange County, California. And I have been teaching now for 8 years. And I also was awarded the 2020 Teacher of the Year for my school site this year. So hi, welcome.
Tracy?
Hi, I'm Tracy Charlo. I am from way up northern New York, and probably as far away from New York City as you can get for those of you who think New York's all about New York City. I have just retired after teaching 35 years adapted physical education, and I'm really excited to be here with this awesome group of people. I also was awarded the 2016 Shape America National Adapted PE Teacher of the Year, as well as I am a proud open trainer.
And Kelly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Bammer. I am an adapted physical education specialist in Pleasanton, California, which is Northern California, and I teach mostly mod severe students and a few students who meld into the gen ed population in a mild mod setting.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're going to start with a couple of questions, and I'm going to give every panelist a chance to share their response. Our first question is, what will you do when you're teaching distance with digital resources, video, that asynchronous learning, and when in Zoom meetings or synchronous learning? And so why don't we have Danielle, would you like to start with that one? Sorry, you're to my right. So
yeah, I'll start off. So I teach mainly moderate severe children with disabilities. I have an autism specific program, moderate to severe, and then I also have a non-categorical moderate to severe. That's more of the life skills program. But in the past, I've also taught children in the mild mod SDC settings as well. But for the past few years, my focus has been in the moderate severe setting. So through this distance learning, I've been doing different modalities when it comes to sending out my resources, because my students need so much adult support and so much hand-over-hand prompting and guiding through the lessons. A lot of my teaching started to become tutoring to the student, to the students' parents, and really guiding them through how to teach APE at home. So I did a lot of pre-recorded tutorials on Flipgrid. That one's my favorite. So I would do a lot of pre-recorded tutorials on there, and then I would send those out to the parents. Those pre-recorded videos were, I would use those in two different ways. One would be specifically for the child's goal. So I'd be sending that to the individual parent. And then I would also do pre-recorded videos of any live session that I taught. So I would do live sessions on Zoom, and my ed specialists, the classroom teachers, they would help host those for me. So then I can just be running my lessons, and those were big whole group lessons. And then, like I said, I would pre-record any skills that were taught in there, so then the parents could review it and practice those skills throughout the week. And then I also used modalities as Google Classroom and Class Dojo. Those are the two big ones that I used, and I was a support teacher on my classroom teachers' websites, just because that was the best way to get through with my parents. It was really difficult for me on my own just to have my own APE section. It was too overwhelming for the parents, so hacking on was my best way.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy?
Okay, so I had a different situation. We were told by our administrators that we were not allowed to do any direct contact. So we had to go with non-direct contact, the asynchronistic. So we were asked by our administrators to start a Facebook group for our families, and we did. And that was for my program that's applied behavioral analysis with which are kids who are on the spectrum. It's a direct focus on the way that they learn. It's very specific, the way we teach. And but with my more involved students, I worked with a physical therapist, and we do some therapeutic sharing of goals. So I kind of tagged on to what she was sending home, and she gave the safety suggestions for the kids so that they didn't do anything that would be harmful. And it really helped that I was able to tag on and add some great activities that the families and the students could do.
Wonderful. I like that. And Kelly?
So in the beginning, we were asked to create a Google Classroom. Our platform form here in Pleasanton is Gmail. So Google Classroom is what we were asked to use. I started a Google Classroom. I would make tons of videos a day based on fitness, areas of motor learning that I knew my students could gain knowledge in. And I would make small, short videos of how to do those things. And then I thought, you know, I have to really start interfacing with these students. So I started a day-by-day class via Zoom, where my students who can follow along a little bit easier, watch me and then emulate. Those students, I focused a lot on fitness and doing Tabata style workouts with them. And then my other students who are severe and have a more adult interactions with the parents, I focused more on choosing a theme, and maybe that theme was around colors, shapes, ideas of prepositional phrases. And then I would look at Jack Hartman and other resources and other ideas that I could share my screen with them. And I would develop a theme around whatever I came up with, the shapes, colors, and we would do motor activities based on those videos that I could access off the YouTube or the web. And that's how I conducted in spring. It's going to be a big difference for me, though, in the fall. I'm going to streamline things and change things up a little bit and hit the kids more in their areas of goals, where we had the caveat here of being able to write that due to COVID, we were unable to test. We're not going to be able to use that as a caveat any longer. And so I'm going to focus more on hitting them with their goals and where they need to be.
That sounds wonderful. I don't know if Danielle or Tracy, did you want to add, or Danielle especially, Tracy's retired. Did you have anything to add to what you'll be doing starting in the fall that maybe you didn't show, that you didn't do in the prior, from March to May?
So yes, I'll be doing a lot more small group instruction, the live instruction. A lot of my parents, it was just really difficult to get everyone on board to do live APE sessions. They definitely enjoyed the pre-recorded videos a lot more. So then when it was appropriate for them, they were able to do them at any time that they liked. But yeah, my goal coming through this year is a lot more small group, having a hard set schedule and making sure that I'm getting my kids serviced live as much as possible. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
And I think we have Eric has joined us, and he is another panelist. And Eric, I don't know if you're not able to unvideo.
My video, I tried to turn it back on, but it just does a fuzzy screen and it looks all brown and black. I'm sorry.
Not a worry. Welcome.
Technology at its best. I'm sorry.
Exactly. No worries. And Steph, why don't you take a moment, if you could introduce yourself and tell a little bit about yourself and where you're from, you know, what you teach and
Certainly.
where, and then also our first two questions that we had posed with, you know, what will you do when you're teaching distant with your digital, your asynchronous, you know, what you did, and then what will you do moving forward, both that and then the synchronous with like when you're on Zoom, and we'd love to hear.
Certainly. So my name's Eric Hamilton. I'm an adaptive physical educator. I've been teaching for, I think it's 16 years, maybe it's 17, but, and I work in the Dublin Unified School District. I've been working with many of the individuals on the screen, Kelly Bammer, Cindy Chase. I don't know if Nancy's on. I didn't look at the participants, with Special Olympics, coordinating the sports through the school's programs. And we've been doing that for 9 years, I think.
Yeah.
All together. And yeah, I teach at the high school. In my career, I've taught everything from preschool through high school transition for adaptive PE. And I currently have a program called Cooperative PE, where we have general ed with special ed, and we follow the Special Olympics training cycle. And we do training 2 days a week for sports specific skills and 3 days a week of fitness.
And what did you do during our distant learning, in the sense of, you know, either the digital or in the asynchronous or the synchronous? How did you make that work?
I'm not familiar with the terms, so forgive me. I apologize. I should have asked the terms, but the asynchronous or synchronous. But so what I did, all my sessions were live. There were resources that were emailed out. We have a platform in our district that many of you may have something similar to, that we use for grading and messaging to student body and parents. So as a department, our physical education department sent out a mass resource for those that wanted to do fitness on their own, fitness log as well. And then for myself, I can't speak for the other professionals I worked with, but for myself, I had office hours twice a week. And 1 day a week where it was one of those 2 days was all day long. They just needed to email me, and then I would get back to them as soon as I could. And we'd set up a time within about an hour span where I could communicate directly with them. And it seemed to work really well for those parents that couldn't get on. My schedule had to be, well, I can talk about that in a second, but all my sessions were direct. So when they were on the screen, I did utilize resources that I had shared out. But many times it was me, and then I would pause what I was doing with them, and I'd be able to directly communicate with the parent via the chat privately, so that I wasn't sharing information. And then I did not record any of my sessions. None of my sessions were recorded. I felt that was very intrusive for the parent, the student, as well as myself. So
Okay.
I do know that it kind of keeps us, you know, on a personal note, feeling that, you know, safe as a result of recording as well as teachers, but it also makes us feel kind of like, you know, that we're on a stage if we're being recorded. You know, we can't make mistakes when we're being recorded. So for me anyway, that's how it made me feel. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but that's how it
actually made a lot of mistakes on my pre-recorded videos, but I thought that was really good for my parents specifically, because I know Eric, you jumped in late, but I work with a lot of moderate, severe, medically fragile children. So a lot of my videos and teachings were through the parents, and then the parents would carry out my lessons. And so I actually liked when I made mistakes on the videos. And for a moment, I wanted to stop and re-record the video, but I thought it was empowering to the parents to see even me, the professional, is going to miss throwing this softball at my homemade pep stack that I made in my house. We all make mistakes. It's totally okay. And I feel like if we want our parents to be really, really involved in this distance learning and get their hands in there and really help our kids, they have to know that, you know, there's going to be tons of mistakes that come with that.
We just made sure the videos didn't have the students in it too. It was just your pre-recorded.
Correct. Yeah, if it was just you.
Okay, information.
Yeah, I do know that our district had releases that they sent out if we were going to record, for parents' permission to record the sessions with the students on there. So
Oh, yeah.
I didn't bother with any of that because I didn't record any of my sessions.
No,
but,
yeah, we weren't
um,
I don't
record
think-
any sort of
I
live
did,
sessions.
I did pre-record some of the skills and drills. And when I did send those
Mhm.
out, I made them specific to the student.
Mhm.
One particular student wanted to focus primarily on training for soccer. So I have 3 wonderful children who love to help me make videos. So I would have them on the video and I would specifically utilize the student's name and then send those videos to the parents with the kid's name on it. And at the tail end, it was like, you can do this, blah, just kind of the buildup of giving them that social and emotional piece where their name's being used and they're being praised for their hard work, and that, whether they do well or not in the video is like, hey, you can do this, keep working, kind of stuff. But everything was live with me on it. The pre-recordings were sent out separately as links and resources, but my entire week was live sessions. Some of my sessions I pushed into the STC classroom teachers where they would start their session and they'd have a movement break. And then I would be 30 to 45 minutes, depending upon which teacher it was and how they formatted their movement breaks.
Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you so much. I thought we would go on to the third question, which I have. When you return back to the classroom, when we go back to school, when it's safe, what, in that big picture and also specifics, what do you plan? What have you thought of? We can go, whoever wants to go first.
I'll go.
Go, Tracy.
I'm not really going back,
Tracy.
of course. I am retired, but I am probably going to be doing some consulting with the teachers that are there. So I really think it's important that we focus on the fact that we don't know, our kids are not going to be the same that they were as they were when they left. They've dealt with a lot. They don't really know how to communicate with us as to what they've dealt with. And it's just going to be really difficult. And we have to be ready to face those social, emotional health and well-being topics. And this is going to be true for our students, families, and our staff, as well as even the administrators. I mean, imagine making all those hard decisions. We might not agree with the decisions that they made, but they're hard. So I know routine, getting that routine established of how to stay safe, acknowledging the fact that the 6 foot rule potentially could be abstract to our students. They might actually envision 6 sets of sneakers in a row, 6 feet in a row. It's not really concrete, and we need to realize that and come up with the appropriate way to communicate with them, and just help them organize themselves, by creating an environment that really embraces their individual needs, like spot, definition of where they're supposed to stand. Maybe we need to look at like textures and colors and the size of an area. I mean, it's just going to be really different from every kid. And I think the biggest thing is know that we're probably going to fail at some things and try not to, but don't judge ourselves on that, because we need to step forward here.
I can't wait to see my kids in person again. I get a little emotional just even saying it because I want to be back there so bad. I do know that I rely heavily on hand over hand manipulation of a lot of my students. I know I'm going to have to look at that and reevaluate that and use my markers and my feet placements and my hand placements more than I've ever used them in the past. But I envision when I get back getting as close as we can to normalcy as we had it in the past. Taking precautions, wearing masks, washing our hands, students washing hands, but trying to get as normal as we can back when we're in full view of students and full proximity of students. I can't wait.
I too agree with everything Tracy and Kelly said. I'm going to be doing those exact same things along with, I do a lot of, I have a really big inclusion program at my middle school. So what I am going to plan on doing is I'm going to be taking that gently and softly at first. I think it's going to just be overwhelming for our students to be coming back in the first place, just coming back to school, like Tracy said, the routines and whatnot. So what I am going to do before I physically come back to school with my students, I'm going to be doing a lot of collaborating and communicating with my gen ed PE teacher and really trying to follow whatever curriculum or unit she's in at the time, so I can match that during my distance learning. So then we're doing, although we're not together, we're still doing some sort of parallel work. And then as my students come back and we're starting to feel comfortable, just being able to slowly get back into the groove of things. But I also think just that communication with my gen ed PE teachers to know that inclusion is still very important to me. And it's something that it's important to her as well. It's important to the culture of our school. It's something that we are going to support and slowly get back into.
Wonderful. How about you, Eric?
It's kind of a loaded question as far as what we're going to do when we go back. I mean, it's so hard to tell what the districts are going to want to utilize in the future. I mean, again, it's going to come down to what they're currently utilizing, and that's the county recommendations. You know, I think the biggest thing again is like Kelly was saying, and I think everybody was chiming in, is just normalcy for the kids, because they've been at home and all the things that they had learned are kind of being taught in a little bit different nature and being directed to them in a different way than they may be used to. And it may not be something that they've been happy about. I'm sure that they'll be very happy to see us in many cases, but it's going to be hard because they're now going to be coming back to generalize and follow directions from people they're not used to having right there in front of them. It's kind of a separate entity. It's like, you know, you always say a screen is great because you can separate yourself from it, but when you're physically there, that you're right there, and it's going to be different for them. It's going to be a lot different for them, if that makes sense. But I am really not sure how that's going to work. I mean, making it as normal as possible, and of course, making it as safe as possible for the kids. I know everybody's concerned about safety and health of the kids first. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll just have to see how it plays out, and hoping for the best and thinking positive that it's going to be a good thing when we get back, because it'll sure be fun to work with the kids again.
Absolutely. And I think you're right, Eric, with the what are we going to do? I think also has to be asked is, how are we going to do it? Because I think those are the big pieces. The big piece there is what we have to base it off what we know, and then also what is given to us. So I always think of that location will be also a key piece. I had one last question I wanted to ask, and then we have some questions that we can go with. And this is more of, what do you see as the best way to connect and serve your AP students? I think we've already talked a little bit about distant, but I think I'm thinking more of like that in-person instruction. What do we've talked a little bit about it, but that connecting time, what is the best way to connect with them that you think? So it's just kind of more recapping of what we've said, but also kind of going back to the student first.
We've already had a discussion, this panel group, and we learned a lot about what each of us have done, and it was it was awesome. I'm so respectful of everyone here. And I think it was Danielle, when she was talking about the tutorials with the parents. Many times the parents are the key to our students' success. And I think it's just kind of been a real eye opener for everyone how important the families really are. If we didn't have the families behind us during this whole distance learning, we would not have been able to do what we do. And so I know if I were going back, and what I will be sharing with my colleagues that go back, is that we really need to tap into those families and get them to buy into being physically active for a lifetime, so that their children can be physically active for a lifestyle, because many of them need that support in order to achieve that.
Thank you. That's
Totally agree with everything Tracy just said. That was my biggest takeaway from this last spring is the family's ability to be immersed in what I do and learn about what I do. It was the most communication I have ever had with parents in the past. I think they gleaned a lot of insight as to what my job is. I think that they just saw me as a peripheral person on the team. I think that they gained a lot of respect for what we all do. If there was one takeaway for me that was really eye-opening is that the parents were so involved with my Zoom classes and willing to participate fully. And more I saw that out of them, the more their students were engaged. They took the green light from their parents, like, oh, this is great, so I'm gonna think this is great too. And I had so much support and attendance that I was really excited and happy that parents respect our position and what we bring to their students.
Thank you. Danielle?
One more tip on that too is a lot of times our families don't understand what universal design for learning is. When in relation to physical education, if we can really push that with them, then they can do family activities at home, even if they're not teacher directed, for a lifetime, and be physically active by knowing how to modify or adapt to their child's needs.
And I love that you say that, Tracy, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I actually made some of my tutorials that I made were DIY homemade equipment, and it empowered my parents to start thinking of their own DIY. What do they actually have at their house? And then some cross-curricular came in where one of my parents, she has two children with disabilities, one moderate severe, and then the other one, she's in like an SDC Mile Mod program, but she had both of her children go outside, they cut cardboard, painted it. So they're doing a little bit of math and measuring, they're doing a little bit of arts and crafts, and they built their own cornhole set. And then with the bean bags that I provided them, she had them underhand tossing bean bags together. And she's like, my children never play together. We're outside tossing, enjoying our craft that we made. And it just, if we can do that, and like you said, Tracy, empower our parents to want to keep practicing our skills, because we have the best job in the world. It is so fun. And I agree with like what Kelly said. I just don't think they ever really, you can say it in an IEP, you can show a video of your classroom, but when they actually see it happen at their home and it's happening and it's working and the kids are happy and they're engaged, it's a game changer for them. Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Eric, do you have anything else to add to that?
I think, like you all were saying, it's just the connectivity to the parents and the student is they want to feel like you're buying into their growth, and you want to be there to help them and support them in any way they can from home, because it's a learning lesson for the parents too. I think the parents by and large value us. They just don't realize how much work we do with these kids. And I think by being online live with us and seeing what we do with the kids in a live format, they realize, just how valuable we are. So I think that's a huge thing. And definitively the whole buy-in and making the kids feel supported is huge.
I would agree. And so thank you, everyone. We have a few questions. I don't know, panelists, can you see those questions? Is there anyone that wants to answer one of the questions that we have up in front?
I'll touch on I'm a general ed PE teacher, and collaborating with our site APE teacher.
With Kayla?
For me, the best thing is to reach out and do live sessions with them so that we can collaborate live, because therefore what the general ed individuals were doing versus what we were doing is a little bit different. They were doing a lot of video and logs versus live sessions. There were some live when it came to, like, for example, at the high school weight training. They were doing live weight training sessions where they were on live with the instructor for that, as well as our yoga and dance teacher. But by and large, most of those were pre-recordings versus live sessions that were sent out. So for me, it was more about talking with them and collaborating with them to see what they're sending out and see what was going to fit the needs of our kids. And then in addition, if they were going to do some live sessions and I had a student in there, whether it's a student who had a physical disability or someone that had an emotional need that needed more support and encouragement in the classroom, that I was able to at least be on there if they wanted me there or needed me there.
Perfect.
And I also add to that, Cindy, I have a few teachers I collab with at the middle school and high school level. I would do a Zoom and invite those teachers to join me, and they did come. And then they started, because our high school and middle school were not doing a model of Zoom. They were mostly sending home materials and having the kids work on their own. They would start to invite other gen ed kids to show up. I will be honest, none of them came, but it was fun to collaborate with the gen ed teacher to have her come into my Zooms and do the same activities that we were doing. And she got to interact with the students. And it was a good situation where we could work together. So it worked out very well. I would suggest you get together with your APE specialists and maybe go to their Zooms, and you show up to their gen ed Zooms if they have them.
I'd like to add too, I agree with what everyone's saying. It's awesome. We have to remember that as adapted PE teachers, we can also learn from our Gen PE teachers. I had a really great experience with the classroom, the Gen PE teacher that I push in with in the middle school, and she did reflection questions, and she did a mindfulness session with with all of her students. And one of my students that we struggle with, he with his anxiety level and acting out, acting up, he found that he described why he liked in his reflection, why he liked mindfulness and how he was going to use it in the future. I was then able to, as the adapted PE specialist, share that with all of the other providers that student has. So we all learn from that experience what would help this 8th grader maybe deal with his day and his anxieties.
Wow, that's
It's
wonderful.
just huge. It's really huge.
Yeah.
The connection, collaboration, connection.
Absolutely, we are a team. Is there another question? I know that
Yeah, I'm
Go
sorry to interrupt. I saw a really good question and I don't have the answer perfectly to this, but maybe some of our people, panelists do, as well as those that are on the chat could chime in and respond to the entire group on this. But how will you assess virtually? And that is, it's actually very difficult to assess virtually because you can't necessarily see every aspect of what's going on. You can only see bits and pieces. But the biggest thing is that you pick something that you can identify, and that if you're going to assess that item, make sure that you have full preview of the entire individual's body movement. And if it's an activity where they're throwing something, that you have preview of not only their body movement, but where the item is being directed and how it's being directed. So making sure that it's completely virtual. And then in your body, most likely you want to note your observation and say professional observation, because it is professional observation. It is not direct observation. You're on screen, and that's not necessarily the same as being directly right there the whole time, being able to see every little tiny aspect in slow motion or in real time. I'm sorry.
Well, and then speaking in regards to assessing for data collection for goals and formal assessments for triennials and initial evaluations, I'm still waiting for word on my district. I'm in Orange County, Irvine Unified School District, highly litigious district. So I'm actually waiting for word on top down on how they want us to effectively collect data. We have not been asked to since March 13th when schools closed down, but moving forward with the fall, they are looking at avenues and how we can do that, because as we know, data drives our whole IEP process and really making goals that are going to fit our child's needs. So I would obviously highly recommend making sure that you are in compliance with what your district's doing. But I know, like I said, for my district, there is some talk about our initial assessments that are coming in for our preschoolers, possibly having some of our DIS service providers coming in and doing one-on-one initial assessments, just so all those preschool children are getting their DIS services as well. So that would be including gross motor APE. Again, it's something that's in the works for my district. They're still talking about how we can safely do that. And obviously it's, 3-year-olds and we're trying to do an initial gross motor assessment on them. We know there's a lot of hands-on that would need to be done for that. So those are the kinks that they're still, it's going to, a lot of just observation. But as far as current goals that students have, it's going to be tricky if our districts do decide to have us do online or live data collecting, because we really don't know the levels of prompting that the parents are giving prior to the children doing it. And even though we can see it on the screen, it's different when you're not there. We know that even our aides can get, we sometimes even have to have our adult support staff back up and everyone be quiet and really make sure that you're getting the true skills out of the child without that additional prompting. So, but as far as formal assessments, no, unfortunately, at least my district doesn't have an answer on how we're doing triennials or initials yet. No.
Same with us in Pleasanton, no word yet as to how we're going to do triennials, initials, even data collection per se. The way I envision it, if we have to do it virtually, is one-on-one Zooms with the families and a lot of direct instruction to the parents about how it should look. Materials I use will have to be dropped off at their homes in order to fulfill the goals completely. And that's a little bit nerve-wracking. I don't know how it's going to look. I really am nervous about that.
Yeah.
And I do believe that that's kind of why we do have to state that we don't know. I'm also in Pleasanton, and I know that we've been told we will be expecting to do that, and the district is waiting to hear back from the lawyers. So I think that, when you place that in that legal bind, in that legal position, we want to make sure that what we're being told to do is legally correct, and there's that safety piece, and that, we're moving forward in that way. We're still doing it. So that's the best we can answer at this point in time based off what we have. Is there, let's see, I'm looking at other questions. We have a few other questions. Let's see. Is there anyone that wants, we have, how will you assess? We kind of talked a little bit about, or parent feedback regarding the students' goals. I know that I did for my students with for our, the ones that I did see on Zoom, and I did get separate videos. I did end up using that data, but I also did put with the caveat, this was done in a, and I shared what kind of environment it was, so that it was as Eric pointed out, it was something I viewed. It was not in-person assessing.
There's a question on here about what did you do? What are some ideas for children with visual impairments? I'm guessing that means in regards to distance learning. I have a student, I actually don't have a big VI program in our district, but I do have one student who has, he's in my moderate severe non-categorical program, and he has autism and he's blind. And so I had to do a lot of, again, one-on-one tutorials with his mom, really showing her how to make VI equipment at home. So it was a lot of, because, you just have to assume that kids don't have a beeper ball laying around or a bell ball laying around. So it was a lot of us, okay, let's just start getting creative with what you have and how can we make sound with it. So she would go out and buy rattles. So then she would be shaking the rattle so he knows where the location is of where his target is. He in particular has a goal ball rolling goal. So she would have the rattle X amount of feet away, and she'd be shaking the rattle. And then I would show her how to physically prompt him through the skills so he understood the rolling mechanism of it. Again, this child, he has autism and he's blind. So there was a lot of factors. It wasn't just that the verbal input piece that he needed. He needed a lot of hand over hand prompting as well. But we also did like DIY balloons, and we would put different shakers in there. So we would put quarters, and we would put paper clips, anything that would shake and make a lot of noise. And so then he could work on balloon rally that way. He also really liked to dribble a basketball, which was requiring that hand over hand prompting to get it started. But once he got the rhythm, he can maintain it. So she did go out and purchase just a cheapy little bouncy ball so we can practice that. But that was something that he just truly enjoyed to do. So I wanted to make sure that that was included in his curriculum at home. But as far as VI, yeah, I mean, it was a huge struggle for me to even address it. But again, just working with the parents and giving them a lot of the skills. And then it was kind of trial and error. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not there and I don't have all my equipment. So go try this. Let's see how it works. Come back to me. And then let me think of some more ideas for you.
Yeah, I love that you tapped into the joy part of it, because I think that if we can get the families, empowered through joy and seeing their child has joy, then that brings joy to everybody. And then that just enhances standard 5, really. Let's get active for life.
Yep, effective all the way.
Yep.
Absolutely. The only things I would add would be if that student, when some ideas for the children with VI is, I know that sometimes when you, especially when you return, is having, obviously they'll have some support, but having things that are on the floor or whatever, so that they can feel a little bit of the different textures, or that rope that's got that their hand can go across. So something that gives them that boundaries and that area. Go a little bell ball, and I know this would be a bought one. I use there's like a 6-inch by Gopher that I use a lot, and for table ball rolling. So rolling that ball on that table and that cause and effect of it really helps with that, prior to catching type of mode. That if that's a nice one, is kind of just that table ball, but having a bell or something in it would be great. Let me see. We've got a few more questions. You were told to have I'm looking at, what evidence do I need? We have one from Robin. Anybody, what evidence do I have need about rising during kindergarten manages? Does anybody, I can share if anybody wants to speak on that on the panel.
Is this the Robin Adams question,
Yeah.
Cindy?
You want to read that so then everybody knows what we're.
Sure. What evidence do I need to show that a rising first grader with CP who was in my full inclusion PE class during kindergarten can manage this same setting in first grade? This year, I am getting a new class of students with autism. Classroom teacher and principal want this first grader with CP to join this new class for PE. They feel it would be better this way.
I could answer that. I think that when we look at placement along the continuum of physical education, many times we are just programmed to think about gross motor skills. And I really feel that, like, I use a lot of assessments with my students with autism, and I actually shared them with EPEW committee, that I will take data, ongoing data, through formative and summative assessments, where I am like looking, just a teacher made criteria based, but that's going to focus on about 7 different prosocial skills that they need to be safe and successful in elementary PE, especially. No matter what, I feel we can accommodate for or modify an activity for their physical needs, but if their pro-social skills are not appropriate, then that's when they cannot access the general PE. That's just what I've learned through working in my program.
Well, and this is why we have IEPs, individualized. We are not grouping our students just because it's more convenient for the principal. This is an
Right.
individualized program, and LRE, whatever is the least restrictive environment for this child. Just because he has a disability does not mean that he goes with everyone else that has a disability. He needs to go what's the least restrictive environment for him, and then tacking on with what Tracy said, where he can be safe, where he can be successful physically, mentally, emotionally. And if him being in a more restrictive environment, that's going to cause him to start self-doubting himself or his skills. That's not going to be emotionally safe for him. He needs to be in an area where he is striving physically and mentally and emotionally, and he's able to continue to grow on his skills. And that's IEP, individualized. It's not a group thing.
Yeah, and Robin, I would say also to that question, it's going to be difficult if you haven't taken data yet on this student, but I would get a team of providers together and all of you come with the same platform, and then you're going to make a difference. Standing alone sometimes doesn't work, but being on a team is very meaningful to administration.
And goals drive services. If his goals show that he is in a larger group setting in Gen Ed PE, and that's where his goals need to be met, then the goals should reflect that service. So.
One thing I would add though is when we come back, looking at that question, we do have that additional layer of that safety piece of, our kind of to piggyback to Tracy with that worry that, those pro-social skills, if that's something that he doesn't quite have that, to me, it amplifies when we go back from that safety point.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you everyone for team. I think we have a few minutes left, so I think we have time for a couple more questions. I have Kim's. If you were told to have your class in the classroom, they need to stay within their seat area, no equipment other than chair yoga, exercise, and dance. What other outside the box ideas do you suggest? I'm working on making game boards to put on my Q camera. I don't know, and whiteboard like fitness bingo and fitness Uno. Those I'm using virtually now. It sounds like those are some good ideas. Does anybody have more that they'd like to?
Well,
yes, Eric.
I'll comment on what is in the works. I don't know if it's going to come to fruition or not, but there was a group of PE specialists in our district in Dublin. They all got together and discussed packages like you normally sell at school, whether it be clothes or otherwise for the kids. And in that package is specific equipment that everybody would have in common for lessons and activities that they could do in small spaces. So that's something to think about if you were going to put together packages. Is somebody did the footwork on this. I'm not sure which PE specialist it was, but they did a really good job and got together a bunch of equipment, both bands, some types of balls, and other types of fitness stuff that are, low tech, if you will, and inexpensive. And they'd reached out to a vendor and apparently put together a backpack that's got these things in it. And the proposal is that these would be purchased by the parents so that everybody could utilize them in their fitness and align them to the PE standards. And again, I'm not sure which PE specialist it was, but a bunch of them got together and did a really great job with that. So
right.
something to think about.
Kind of to piggyback on that, Gopher actually has created those kind of packs for Gen Ed, and they just created one for adapted PE that I've been able to get, that's got like the one scarf, the one bean bag, ring. So it has a little bit, and it's a great thing for them to share at home along, so that when we're at distance, and then something to follow along. But I think that's a great idea. I think that in this one, it's also if you're inside the classroom, what are some ideas that you would do inside the classroom? And I think the idea of the fitness bingo and the Uno are really good ones, and some other kind of follow along I know that I use a lot of, in my routine, I have a lot of those kind of things. Is there anything else, anyone else has some ideas for, like, if you're remaining in the classroom with no equipment or minimal of it.
I would do dance and work on mirroring and
Mhm.
get the kids, like do anything you can to try to create community within your classroom. So moving together creates community and music creates community. Um, Maybe some call and response type things like I do this, you do this. I clap once, you clap once, and get like, I feel just whatever we can do to bring all the kids together, or however they might not be able to clap, whatever their ability is, figure out what will work for your kids, your students. I think going back to the classroom, it's just going to be different in every district. It's crazy, all the ideas that are floating around out there.
And
I'm
that's what this.
surprised too that the district is saying that they have to be indoors, because everything that we have talked about points to that we should all be outside. But I mean, if that's what their district is asking for them to do, my suggestion would be working on skills singularly by themselves, balloon striking in the air, working with partner 6 feet apart, working on underhand tossing to yourself with small foam balls, working on rolling, working on individualized skills in the space that you have, singularly. That would
Like,
be
and like
my
Kelly's,
suggestion.
yeah. And like Kelly's saying, I don't know if the concern, it sounded like in the question, no equipment was allowed to be used. So
Oh.
I wonder if you can ask if DIY homemade equipment, if the kids can make it, so then they all have their own little pieces of equipment, or a few balloons, or a couple homemade bean bags, so then they could be in their chairs practicing those object manipulation skills. Obviously, like Kelly said, individualized practicing them. But if the concern is the sharing of equipment and touching the same things, I would see how you can get around, just like I said, DIY equipment, or like Kelly said, maybe some small, cheaper, like wiffle balls or tennis balls that everyone can have their own, just like little bag of them, even just one each, so they can practice skills.
Even just socks from home rolled
Yeah.
up, and then you put them in your backpack, they go home, they get washed, new pair of socks the next day.
Exactly.
You can do
Yeah.
a lot with socks.
Paper socks, paper plates, socks and paper plates.
Oh, Chip Candy's paper plate dance is a
One balloon, socks, and a paper plate. You got a lot going on.
Throw in some tape and it's a game changer.
I would also think that if there's no equipment needed, it would be a great time to like still have something of an obstacle course and work on prepositional phrases, like, and just give directions with your arms and how, with the words for the visual, or actually use visual cue cards. And because I think the biggest things our kids need to know how to do is follow directions when they come back. They need to know, this is such a strong word, but the word compliance is really important right now.
Right. And that following directions and that mirroring and modeling, I think, are probably going to be foundational anyways. So, and they don't require equipment. The only thing is, if we're a month in, we'll need to move on a little.
Yeah.
I think, let's see. Oh, the make it take it home. Yeah. It sounds like, Kim, that the district right now is saying that we may not be able to, unfortunately, right now, they say that's on the back burner. And that's a possibility. I think those packs, though, can be mutually beneficial, because if they are distant, then having those packs at home for them to work on before, while we're waiting to come back, and everybody having similar items that they can have. Although, like Kelly mentioned, the rolled up socks are golden. You just remember, when it's your husband's socks, you don't put it back in your APE bag and forget about him when he's short on socks. You're like, oh, wait. It happened, but.
Hey, another thing, Cindy, I wanted to mention is that there's some really great online teacher training on open site that will be beneficial for teachers to take. We talked about assessing. A lot of assessment has to do with the language that you use and the depth of knowledge that you place each question, where it is along the Bloom's taxonomy type thing. So they've got a couple of great like online training webinars for aligning depth of knowledge to grade level outcomes, planning and teaching with priority outcomes in the fall when we return, and a lot of good stuff about social emotional learning. And the open can't give credits for it, but teachers have found success that they can turn in the document that they took, the certificate that they took the class, and get some credits from their district.
Wonderful. Those are great ideas. And I think that there's a lot of things that are going out there. I did see right before we leave, someone talking about APE certification, interested in it. I know that Dr. Bittner has hers at Long Beach, and was with Barry before, and Marcy Pope's at Chico, and they have programs. I'm
Summer.
Dr. Elizabeth Foster at Cal Poly Pomona.
perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I didn't remember the Cal Poly Pomona one.
Yeah.
And stuff. So those are
There's one at University of South Carolina too with Allie. I can't think of her, Dr. Allie. I can't think of her last name, unfortunately.
and stuff.
Heard
Well,
good things
perfect.
about.
Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you to Danielle, Eric, Kelly, Tracy, and Jess to keeping us on track. And thank you, everyone. Please, thank you so much for joining us and for having your questions. And we're better together, and with not only as APE specialists, but also within the teams of the districts we work from and stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.